this, and we're very lucky to have a group of people on here that have put together a consortium called Certification Plus. And Certification Plus is a group of 3 companies, PYA, accounting firm, SCA, Security Compliance Associates, and Real Estate Data Shield. And these are people that truly understand the industry, truly understand what's going on these days when it comes to CFPB. I've known these guys a long, long time, probably Chris the longest, and they truly, truly know what they're talking about. And when it comes to our agents these days, and I know that some of them are still struggling with getting themselves to a place where they can say, hey, I've done what I've had to do to satisfy the rules and regulations of the CFPB. I've done what I've had to do to satisfy the requirements of my lender. I've done what I've had to do to satisfy the recommendations of ALTA up to this point, of course. And most importantly, and I want to make this point, and a lot of you have heard me say this, most importantly, the reason that these agents should be doing this is to protect themselves. And I've been going around the country talking to you guys about this and making this point that yes, they have to do these things because other people are asking. You know, even us underwriters are putting a little pressure on these agents to do these things and recommending and guiding them. But the number one reason they should be doing this stuff is to protect themselves. And you guys have seen all this stuff happening these days with hackers out there, with different groups infiltrating. You've heard them infiltrate AOL recently in New York for $1.9 million. Yahoo had a similar breach. This is a real problem. And our agents are low-hanging fruit. And they better realize this if they're not realizing it as of yet. So with that being said, this is a group of companies that have come together to help the agents with a total solution. Because often when we talk to agents, we have to recommend different vendors at different times depending on their needs. Here's a solution that can help them really in 3 very distinct ways. One, SCA can come in, do an evaluation of their network and their security protocols, making sure they're doing what they have to do, identify gaps or holes, and recommend solutions. Real Estate Data Shield can help and train everybody within that organization, everybody from the receptionist up front to the principal, has responsibilities under the rules and regulations of the CFPB to protect NPI data. And Real Estate Data Shield does a wonderful job in making sure everybody understands that. And thirdly, PYA can come in and give a attestation or a certification or a review, however you want to say it, and give that in documentation form. And anybody who is asking the agent that will have that. So again, I think we're very lucky to have this group of people. I think it's great for the industry, certainly great for Fidelity National Financial. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to Glenn Stout.
Thank you, Rick, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you and the Fidelity team about Certification Plus. That was a great introduction, a nice way to frame what we're going to be talking about for the next couple minutes. So I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Security Compliance Associates, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I want to welcome you, and I also want to begin by introducing some of the speakers today. We've got Chris Galata. Chris is the founder and CEO of Real Estate Data Shield. We have Pete Pearson on the line. Pete is the principal at Pershing Yokely and Associates, or PYA, and we also have Matt Froning. Matt is our CIO at Security Compliance Associates. Took care of it. So
I think we're all set now.
Okay, good. We're scheduled for about 45 minutes, and I thought I'd start with a roadmap to the presentation today. So I'm going to begin today by talking a little bit about market drivers. Rick, you talked about a couple of these, but I'm going to summarize the issues that are driving not only the need for compliance, but the issue that actually became the motivation for our partnership. I'm going to explain the concept behind Certification Plus and describe what we do. I'll present some key benefits to the agents. I'll provide an overview of each solution from our partners, and they'll have a chance to talk to you about that specifically. And then finally, we're going to conclude with frequently asked questions and then open up the floor for you. Okay. So, Certification Plus, we have the most innovative and comprehensive compliance solution on the market today, and we know that because it is unique. There is no other solution like Certification Plus, and we know that our solution is comprehensive in that we include what most agents need to meet the compliance requirements of their lenders and, most importantly, the law. So the market drivers. We do know that self-assessments are no longer going to be acceptable by some lenders, and I use that word some in there because there are lenders that have not sent any notifications at this point. We know that this list is going to be growing and that by all indications will continue to grow throughout 2016. The two lenders on the slide have just recently notified their agents that they're going to require third-party certification. That's Equity Mortgage and Delta Community Credit Union. Other lenders that sent out notifications last year include American Bank and Trust, Bancorp South, Flagstar, and Iberia. We know the trend's going to continue throughout the year, but it's not the only reason, as Rick pointed out, that you should consider or agents should consider certification. In fact, the number one concern for our industry today is cybersecurity. That was at center stage at the ALTA conference. I don't know if anybody attended that in March, but it was the opening session. And that'll continue to be an education focus for the association throughout 2016. To that point, a few weeks ago, Matt and Chris participated in an ALTA webinar, and that was about the life cycle of a data breach. So it's clear that the number of attacks are increasing and that the methods for attacks or the attack vectors used to attack businesses are changing. And it's one of the things we're trying to drive home with our messaging is that our industry is not immune from these attacks. In fact, Rick mentioned it as well, that we tend to be the low-hanging fruit. We're not as sophisticated as some of the larger businesses that Rick has already mentioned that have been breached. So we know that it's a daunting subject for our industry, and many agents are simply not prepared to mitigate an attack or even know what to do after one of those have occurred. So we also know the number of recent studies conducted by Verizon and Ponymon, for example, they point to the employee as the weakest link with respect to data breaches. We've seen in some studies that number as high as 40%. In fact, I was on a news feed yesterday, and Verizon just came out, I think it was fairly recently, with their 2016 Data Breach Investigations Report, and I wanted to share a quote from the report with you. It said that the communication between the criminal and the victim is much more effective than the communication between employees and the security staff. So it's also worth noting that the majority of agents don't have a security staff, which is even more troubling. It's a serious issue, and we really need to start driving this message home to a lot of these agents. And so lastly, we have a number of regulators that have published bulletins on third-party risk management. You have the CFPB, the OCC, and I also wanted to mention the New York State Department of Financial Services, and there are two important takeaways from that report. One, cybersecurity is one of the most critical issues facing the financial world today, and that's no surprise. And number two, they also emphasize that robust regulatory action in cybersecurity is needed. So we know this is coming down the road, and it's just a matter of being prepared before someone hands them a report that says you now have to be certified, and that it is now increasingly more difficult for you to get up to speed. Agency and attorneys will continue to experience increased pressure on a number of fronts. So to document processes and procedures, AKA ALTA best practices, to protect NPI, protect their businesses from cyber attacks, and to deliver evidence to third-party certification. And these are the key drivers behind our solution at Certification Plus. So who are we? As Rick mentioned, we're three companies, PYA, Real Estate Data Shield, and Security Compliance Associates. We are all elite providers. And just by way of background, the association goes and asks us to go through an examination that includes outlining the benefits that we offer to the ALTA members, providing a list of member references, as well as go through our financials. And so we are also a Fidelity preferred vendor. I think I skipped past here. We're a preferred vendor for Fidelity, as Rick mentioned as well. Our executive team are subject matter experts, and they are frequently asked to speak at state, local, and national conferences, ALTA and NS3, meaning two, and we're often quoted in the publications, the ALTA publications, October Research, and most recently, we were on the cover story of Housing Wire. So what is Certification Plus? We have come together, 3 companies have come together to offer a compliance package of services for title and settlement agents and attorneys. Our bundled services consist of IT cybersecurity assessments, which include GLBA gap analysis, certification of ALTA best practices, and that is all 7 pillars. And Rick also mentioned this, the employee training program through an e-learning platform with Real Estate Data Shield. We are a team of very experienced professionals. Our team includes members that have more than 25 years experience in the industry as a title agency owner, as a regulator, or as an underwriter executive. Matt Froning, for example, is a certified information systems security professional and an IT security specialist with more than 21 years active duty service with the Air Force. I believe that was also as the Chief of Computer Investigations and Operations. Chris Galata is a certified information privacy professional, and our partners at PYA include certified public accountants, certified fraud examiners, and certified internal auditors. So all that to say, and the point behind that is we know title, we know security, and we know auditing and accounting. So here's some key benefits that I want to point out for the agents. So first and foremost, we're affordable, and that's one of the first questions we're going to get. How much does it cost? So for a single location, 2 or fewer escrow accounts and 8 employees, it's approximately $8,800. And I'll tell you that we launched this at the Business Strategies Conference a few weeks back, and the agents that we spoke to were, believe it or not, pleasantly surprised. They in fact thought that our fee was going to be more than double that. So that was not going to be a barrier for us. A single point of contact. And that's important because what we've done here is designed behind the scenes a solution that they can do business with all 3 companies and have a single point of contact. An agent or an attorney can initiate with any of the partners, and that person will then organize the details of the engagement behind the scenes, from the proposal to the scheduling and to the billing. Our clients can receive third-party certification of all 7 pillars, as I mentioned before. And another key important benefit here is that we will assist you during the certification process. So what we mean by that is that when we identify those gaps in their policies and procedures and their IT security infrastructure, we're going to provide feedback and suggestions and corrective measures to help fill those gaps. And I think that's very, very important. We're not going to go in, do an assessment, and leave and say, okay, now call us when you have these things completed. That's very important for this. The agent will be assessed for GLBA compliance standards, which is required by law, and Matt's going to address that more specifically. And with the REDS e-courseware and training platform, upon completion of the courseware, the agent is going to have certificates of completion, which they then can present to their lenders, that their agents, that their employees have been trained. So, and what's not on the slide, and I think it's another important point here, is that once they've been certified, agents can then market their compliance of Certification Plus to ultimately grow their business to their lenders, to their consumers, and also to their underwriter partners. So that's all I have for the first part of this presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Chris Galata with Real Estate Data Shield. Chris?
Thank you, Glenn. And good morning, everyone. We usually get to visit with you all at the agency forum that Fidelity will host sometimes down in February or March in Jacksonville. But great visiting with all of you. Rick, thanks to you and Linda for helping to set this up. It's been a pleasure working with most of you for about 4 or 5 years now, and coming out to your states and helping to educate your agents. And for those that we haven't done that with, we're happy to discuss coming out and setting up what we call Bridge the Gap programs and workshops where we invite the agents to bring their office manager, their IT consultant, and have an interactive workshop with our team so that the principal is able to, at the end of the session, say to their team that they've brought with them, hey, you got it now, and you go ahead and take over. I'm delegating it to you. We found that that's really helpful. It's not just the principal going to an ALTA event or a underwriter event, getting scared, learning, becoming aware, going back, and nothing happens. So the Bridge the Gap is designed to allow the principal or executive to bring their implementation team. We work with them, we train them on what they need to know, and then they can take it from there. A little bit about REDS, because one of our taskings was today to help arm you with how to educate your agents about our products and services, and hopefully promote the three companies and what we do. So Real Estate Data Shield was one of the very first, if not Fidelity's very first best practice solution provider. We're very proud of that. We were Real Estate Data Shield was Alta's very first elite provider, and as Glenn said, that's a difficult program to get into. PYA was Alta's first accounting firm to achieve that status. As Glenn said, each of the companies have executive teams that are subject matter experts in either information security, accounting, auditing, and fraud, or in information security and privacy. But what makes us, I think, very unique is the combination of the three of us and the coupling of our respective skills, resources, and talent, and also the fact that that's layered with principals in each company that have 20 to 30 years of experience as either an underwriter executive, as a regulator in this industry, or as a principal of a title or settlement firm. That unique know-how makes us not just a generic solution provider for the title and settlement industry, but we know and feel every step and every pain that an agent goes through in their process. Rick alluded to something before that really means a lot to me. Agents should be doing this, first of all, to protect themselves. The analogy I use when I speak a lot is if you have a restaurant on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and windows are getting broken at night, sooner or later you know that you need to put up a security gate to protect your business. And that's the first reason agents should be doing this. If they suffer a breach in the retail world, 40% of the time, no one will come into your store again. So imagine what it is in our industry where our upstream lender referral sources are under all the pressure that Glenn alluded to with the third-party bulletins from the OCC, FDIC, Federal Reserve, and CFPB. So really they should be out there looking to protect the business they've invested their careers in, tons of money in, and obviously, if you think of a stagecoach back in the days of the Old West, the stagecoach wasn't robbed as it was leaving the Wells Fargo financial center or branch. It's robbed, obviously, on its supply chain path. And that's what's happening in our industry. And title and settlement agents are the supply chain. We're the weakest link. And that's why, as fraudsters smarten up, they're going to attack the money and the documents and the information contained therein while it's in its supply chain and in our industry. Another message to get through to your agents is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't worry, is the lender, ultimately, any particular lender going to ask for a certification, an examination? Get started with the process. Position yourself well. Going from any level of, quote, certification to a higher level is a lot easier than starting from zero. And then we're going to move through the slides. So, Glenn, if you could move to slide 10 for me.
There you go.
So Real Estate Data Shield's executive team includes myself, 25 years as a principal of a settlement law firm in New York, and 10 years as an exclusive title agent who had a zero claims rate and remitted on the first of the month, Rick, for none other than FNTG. But also on my executive team, I included Professor Paul Schwartz from Berkeley Law School, who's widely recognized as one of the leading internationally recognized information security and privacy experts. If you study privacy law in law school, there's a 50% chance you're using his textbook. Richard Purcell, who was Microsoft's very first privacy officer. So I brought in one of the leading privacy experts, one of the leading data security experts, and together took them through the workday and workflow of a title or settlement firm and identified all the key risks, and we developed the training tools together. If you could advance, Glenn. We've emerged as the industry standard for information security. Again, we were Alta's first elite provider, and we've won 2 e-learning awards, prestigious e-learning awards for our courseware. We just came out with REDS 2.0. What I did was, to the base courseware, we added 2 new modules. The first module, the summary, the introductory module, is designed to do for the agent owner what they otherwise can't do, because they can't typically bring all their employees to Alta events and underwriter events to get educated in the need for information security compliance, concerns about CFPB and OCC lender oversight. The first module is kind of a learning module where the employees take about 5 or 7 minutes to learn why lenders are under more pressure and why the title and settlement industry needs to pull themselves up by the bootstrap and become compliant with CFPB and OCC mandates. Then they undergo the courseware training, and then the summary module takes them through a deeper dive into the 10 skills of a privacy smart professional. The products we offer include not just the training, but we also offer information security policy and procedure templates and a security self-assessment tool. It's like a diagnostic tool. Agents answer and they get a score and they identify where the weaknesses are. What's great about the courseware and the compliance management platform that it's hosted on is that the head person or the team lead at any agent can monitor all the employees' status in the training and see on their executive dashboard who has started the course, who's taking the course, who's successfully completed it, and that way can manage the process much more easily. Glenn, if you would. Thank you. So we talked about the 3 products, the policies and procedures, the staff training, and the security self-assessment. By the way, with regard to staff training, as Glenn mentioned, information security experts will tell you the human is the greatest risk vector. 40% of all breaches happen at the human level. You could have the best policies and procedures, best firewalls, best security cameras, but if your employees are clicking send instead of send and encrypt, or if they're throwing documents containing non-public information into a regular garbage pail rather than a shred pin, it's going to come back and bite the agent. So you have to arm your employees with an awareness of what's expected and what they need to do to safeguard customer information. Glenn, if you would. This is just a screenshot of the interactive courseware that's won the 2 e-learning awards. This is a screenshot from the preamble. We developed an avatar to take the learner through the process. This is screenshots from the summary module where CC, our compliance coach, again takes them through specific things like what is a clean desk policy and why is it important, and specific skills to that effect. Glenn, if you would. This is the administrative dashboard I referred to before, where typically an office manager would have the administrative privileges and would be able to identify who started, who's taking, and who has successfully completed the course and printed out a certificate evidencing that. These are just screenshots of some of our policy and procedure templates that companies can use to get started with the policy and procedure requirements of the FTC and Gramm Leach Bliley. This is, again, a screenshot of our self-assessment. Agents answer yes or no, and they get a score, and they can identify where they've come up short and what they need to start working on. And as I've said, compliance, I've said this in a lot of conferences, compliance is the new marketing, as Glenn alluded to. Prepare for lender oversight, prepare for those letters that are going to come from lenders, and start the process right now. And we're happy to come out and do the Bridge the Gap seminars to help train your agents and their key implementation staff to bridge the gap from where they are now to getting themselves certified. Compliance now needs to become a required competency. Our industry is slow to this process. Gramm Leach Bliley went effective in 2001, and it was only in 2012 when this messaging came to our industry. So really important now that we are under the spotlight and that lenders are sending out third-party bulletins, regulators are sending out third-party bulletins to lenders, that we understand those lenders in turn are going to have to start putting pressure on us. So it's critical to safeguard your business, your reputation, that you protect it, that you implement these safeguards, and that you ultimately can evidence that in a certification to show lenders that you've taken that seriously. I think that's it for me, Glenn.
I think that's it, yes. Thanks, Chris. And I'm going to pass it over to Pete Pearson with PYA.
Thanks, Glenn. Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to participate in today's webinar. Glenn, if you'll go to the next slide. Thank you. PYA is a public accounting firm. You can see where we're located and as Chris mentioned, we were the first Alta Elite provider offering best practice assessments. We have clients in all 50 states, and we've been around since 1983. But probably what may resonate more with this group is that we're just not an office of certified public accountants, but we have in our team individuals such as Gene McCullough, who was the fourth or fifth attorney that Bill Foley ever hired at Fidelity, and who's been in this industry for 35 plus years. We have Deborah Gentry, who has been an agent, has worked with Rhino Live, and has 20 plus years experience in the title industry. We have a former state insurance regulator. We have a former bank compliance officer. So we have a number of folks that bring financial institution and title industry experience into our team, and combine that with the compliance type focus that CPAs typically have to create what we think is a well-rounded team that can help your agents address issues even beyond best practices. So I'm really proud of that group that we have put together. On this next slide, you see that there are a couple of things that we have developed with the expertise that's in that team that I just described, that a lot of agents have taken advantage of and have found extremely beneficial as they begin that process toward becoming compliant with the best practices piece of this. And Chris mentioned how important it is to begin down that path and not to let perfection impede good. Well, these tools are very helpful as agents begin that process. So the first is the gap analysis tool, which is an evaluation of their best practices, policies, and procedures. And so an agent can go to the website, click on the gap analysis tool. They can upload their policies and procedures into a secure portal, provide us a little bit of information about their firm, and within 48 hours, we're back in touch with them to address any gaps that we have identified between their policies and procedures and between Alta's assessment procedures for best practices. The readiness tool is another complementary tool. It's roughly 40 questions. It goes through each one of the pillars, and they basically answer yes/no questions, and it returns a score by pillar so that they can see kind of where they're at in terms of their implementation of best practices and areas where they may need to focus. So those are tools that are out there on the website that agents have shared positive feedback about how helpful those are, that that you can feel free to share with your folks. So then next slide, Glenn. So one of the advantages of having a CPA firm on this team is that it allows us the ability to do a lot of different engagement types. And I'm not going to go into all of those engagement types on this call. In fact, we have education sessions where we educate agents on how or on what types of engagement there are out there and what might be best for what they need as an agent. But suffice it to say, if an agent does Certification Plus and at some point finds that they need, because of a relationship with a particular lender, that they need to have a SOC 2 or an examination or some type of a test engagement that has to be performed by a CPA firm, that we can still do that along with SCA and REDS. And in fact, we can do in a test engagement that attests not only to their compliance with best practices, but also that their compliances with GLBA. And so, Glenn, if you'll go to the last slide of mine. There are a number of things that we provide to clients at the end of these engagements, and with Certification Plus, we're doing pillars 1, 2, and then 4 through 7. SCA is focusing on pillar 3 as they also are doing the GLBA compliance piece of it. And so what we would provide is a certificate that identifies the areas that we have conducted, as well as the ones that SCA has done, and that looks somewhat like the certification that's in Alta certification package. We also provide them what we call a summary of conclusions, and so that lists out the assessment procedures that were used, and the example is on the left-hand side of the slide, and it identifies the pass-fail conclusion that PYA has determined as part of that engagement. And we have had a very positive response from lenders who liked seeing the depth that best practices tested when they get the certification. So that summary of conclusion piece is one of the things we provide. And then the other thing that we do is what we call an out-of-scope memo. And one of the reasons, when Gene McCullough came to us, one of the things that he said is he wanted to make sure that he was working with an organization that was very focused on the agent and what the agent needs. And that's why we provide that menu that was on the previous slide. We want to be able to get the agent whatever the agent needs, not more than the agent needs, not less than the agent needs, but what the agent needs in order to be able to demonstrate compliance to their customers, to their lenders, to regulators, and so forth. And part of that being focused on the agent that led us to do this out-of-scope memo, which basically includes things that as we go through the agency and look at various areas, if there are things that fall outside of best practices, but present a risk to the organization, we capture that in that out-of-scope memo and provide them with a recommendation about how they can mitigate that risk, and provide that to them at the conclusion of the engagement. So it's one of the things that we do that our intent is to look out for the more holistic health of the organization, as opposed to being very narrowly focused. And so that's the last of my slides. Appreciate your attention, and I'll turn it back over to Glenn.
Thanks, Pete. And I'm going to pass it over to Matthew Froning, who's with Security Compliance Associates. Matt?
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Pete and Chris. And good morning, everybody. So, again, my name is Matthew Froning with Security Compliance Associates. I'm the Chief Information Officer with Security Compliance Associates. I'm just going to kind of go through a little bit of the background of Security Compliance Associates, along with what we're bringing to the title industry to help title agents in becoming compliant and securing their environments and their data. So from the background standpoint, SCA has been around since 2000. As you can see, we've been one of the Tampa Bay area's fastest growing companies back in 2003. We've been doing this, our three main verticals are the title and settlement industry, obviously, financial institutions, and healthcare. To date, we've conducted over 3,000 cybersecurity assessments. 200 plus of those have been completed in the title industry in the last couple of years. Our largest vertical is the financial institutions. That's where we started our business, and it's where we've brought a lot of our experience from GLBA standpoint over to the title and settlement industry to help agents and ensuring not only are they meeting Alta best practices, but they're meeting Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act requirements as well. We've experienced, growth of about 35% since 2009, and we're continuing to grow. Currently, we have 20 team members and are continuing to grow. To include, we were recently added to Alta's elite provider status as well. So you can go on to the next slide there, Glenn. As far as certifications, our engineers are highly certified professionals. They've got numerous experiences from the federal government side to NASA to the private industry, as well as financial industry on there. And as you can see, this is a list of some of the certifications that many of the engineers at SCA hold at this time, and they regularly update their security training as part of the requirements for many of these certifications. You have to continuously go through training and maintain that in order to maintain those certifications. Next slide. So as far as our services go, listing out a few of the services over this next couple of slides, obviously we provide cybersecurity gap analysis where we identify gaps within the security of an agency of financial institution, and we provide an analysis and recommendations on how to close those gaps in security. We are also working with PYA, doing the other 6 pillars and doing Alta Best Practice Pillar 3 certification, the protection of MPI, the network and data security, the physical security on that part of it, along with a GLBA gap analysis as part of that assessment process. Because while Alta Best Practices is doing a wonderful job with setting the standards from security perspective in the industry, we want agents to understand where they're sitting at from a Gramm-Leach-Bliley perspective. And so we do that gap analysis on top of Pillar 3, and we bring those together. And then we also do internal and external vulnerability assessments for agents and for other clients. Some of our other services include IT risk assessments. This is where we identify risks based on critical systems and servers that are in locations. We also do social engineering, where we may do phishing exercise to test the training and awareness of employees. It could be an attempt to grab usernames and passwords, or it can be an attempt to see if users will click on erroneous links in an email that could open up the agency to harm. We'll also do physical security reviews and network architecture reviews. A lot of times we've had several clients who have either been moving locations or restructuring their network architecture, and we do those reviews prior to them implementing them and putting the money and the time and effort into creating those environments without knowing whether or not it was a secure solution. So we may provide, we provide recommendations in those situations as well. Next slide, Glenn. So as part of the Alta Best Practice Pillar 3 / GLBA Gap Analysis report, what we've done here is we've taken each one of those assessment procedures and we've broken those out based on the components and their matching up to GLBA requirements, and we pushed those out, and this is an example of what would be within a report. They'll be divided out based on those procedure numbers to question and what the response of the title agent is on whether or not they feel are meeting those requirements, and our determined state through the on-site assessment where we verify if you have policies and procedures in place that they're matching up to the operations. On the next slide, you'll see an example of the summary within that. So within this, not only do we provide a result that may show gaps in the security compliance, but we provide recommendations on how to close those gaps for each one of those. So we work at this as a partnership. We want to make the agent feel like they have a partner in this process, because one of the things with Pillar 3 and information security is you're guaranteed to always have vulnerabilities and risks. That's never going to change. No matter what you do, no matter how much money you put into it, there's always going to be that risk associated with having information systems in your environment. So the key is managing that risk, mitigating risks, and reducing those risks. And so we work to reduce those risks and make sure you're doing everything reasonably possible to protect yourself and protect that data, along with ensuring that that the agent's third-party service providers are also providing a service that you're expecting them to provide and protecting you in a way that you're expecting them to protect you based on your on the agent's service level agreements with them. So if you go on to the next slide, Glenn. At the end, once you've met the requirements of Alta best practices and reviewing GLBA requirements, we would be issuing a certificate. Obviously, there would be a joint certificate as well with all 7 pillars with Certification Plus with PYA. And as part of that certificate process, you also get that comprehensive report, not only showing the gaps and the recommendations, but also once you complete any remediations, they'll be updated to show the work and the level of effort that an agent has put forward in order to become compliant and in order to meet those requirements. And that goes a long way in showing lenders, showing regulators that the agent is taking information security seriously. They're taking the protection of MPPI seriously, and they're doing what they can to a reasonable level in order to protect that information. And annotating all of that, including the remediation steps taken, help with that as far as their effort shown. One of the things with SCA, along with coming on site and doing those assessments and reviewing your security posture, reviewing the agent's security posture, and providing those recommendations, is a lot of times they don't have the in-house experience to fully understand how to implement a recommendation. So what we do is we provide additional support for agents that when they have questions during the remediation process, they can still reach out to a member of the SCA staff and get questions answered in order to make sure they stay focused in the right area and are not going down the wrong path on their way to certification. Next slide. So obviously some of the key benefits for FNTG agents and all agents is, your legal compliance as a financial institution with, the requirement to meet Gramm-Leach-Bliley requirements. Also the ability to uncover vulnerabilities. A lot of times you have an IT staff, whether it's internal or third party, their job is to keep the agent up and running and being able to function on a daily basis from an operational standpoint. However, they don't necessarily have the expertise or the knowledge to uncover vulnerabilities within an environment. So going through this process allows those vulnerabilities to be highlighted and for recommendations to come along that will allow you to, the agent to remediate those. Also are going to become more cyber secure and cyber aware. The agents are going to understand the threats and the risks associated with conducting business and having information systems, and their staff will as well. So helping them become more aware and more cyber secure increases the likelihood that employee is going to notice things like a fictitious email or a wiring instruction change that just doesn't look right. It increases that awareness, and it will mitigate those security risks as well. It also provides access to an information security expert. Having, small organizations like this, they don't necessarily have that readily available access to information security expertise. So providing that access through this assessment process helps agents, and it'll help them sleep at night. Next slide. I believe that is the last one, and I'll turn it back over to Glenn.
Thanks, Matt. I think the last part, we're going to have a couple slides here. We're going to go through a number of FAQs. These are some questions or concerns you may have in the field when you're talking to agents. So we thought we'd be a little preemptive here and give you some ideas to what the questions might be and how to answer them. First one is, what is the difference between a certification and examination, a SOC 1 or a SOC 2? And I'm going to pass this over to Pete. Would you mind addressing this one, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try not to get too technical, but give you a sufficient oversight of what these are. So these are different types of engagements that an agent can select when they want to demonstrate compliance to a third party. And the big difference between these is the accounting standard that is used when in terms of compiling the report. And so in the case of certification and Certification Plus, that is being done under the AICPA consulting standard. And what's important to note here, one of the things that SCA and what we do are a lot of compliance work for financial institutions. And most of that compliance work that we do as a public accounting firm is actually done under the consulting standard. So it's a standard that lenders are very familiar with. It's a standard, maybe more importantly, that their regulators are very familiar with. And so it offers us the ability to test the compliance of the agent at a price point that is less than what it would be if we have to do an examination or a SOC 1 or SOC 2. When you get into the examination in SOC 1, SOC 2, you start moving into the attest side or the attest standard, and there are certain requirements that are professional standards that apply to those situations, and that they are a higher level of assurance that an agent can provide to a lender, but there's a cost associated with that. In the case of an examination, management would make an assertion, and we would come in and we would test that assertion. In the case of a SOC 1 or SOC 2, and I don't want to take a lot of time and get into the differences in a SOC 1 or SOC 2, but suffice it to say, basically, it's just saying that I'm a service organization. I have a set of controls that are designed to address whatever assertion that management is making, and then we can come in and depending on the type, there's a type 1 and a type 2 of each one of these SOCs. We can come in and look at the design of the controls to see if they're sufficient, or we can come in and we can test the controls. Maybe the most important point to make there is that there are organizations out there that could potentially have a SOC 2 type 2, which a lot of people would look as kind of being the holy grail, the highest level of assurance that an agent could have. But depending on how those internal controls are written, and depending on what the management assertion is related to those controls, they may have a SOC 2 type 2, but they may not be compliant with GLBA and best practices. So it's very important that the agent understands what they're looking at in terms of the engagement type, and make sure that they're comparing apples to apples. And that's why we do a lot of education around this to help equip them with understanding what the differences are and the types of questions that they need to be asking to determine what's best for their organization.
Hey, Glenn.
Yes.
Glenn, it's Rick. Can I chime in on that just for
Absolutely,
a quick
sure.
second? So I just want to point out that, when it comes to our agents, most of our agents are small to mid-size. Ultimately, they may not need a certification like this. The advice that we always give is to the agent is to pick up the phone and call the lenders that they're dealing with and ask them very particularly about what it is that they are looking for from their agents, and then make their decisions from there.
And Rick, I think that's very prudent advice that you're giving them. And in fact, a lot of times we have folks calling us saying, "Hey, I think I need an examination or SOC 1 or SOC 2," and we say, "Well, no, let's talk about the advantages of Certification Plus and what that really does." And so a lot of times we're able to save agents, literally thousands of dollars by putting them in the more appropriate engagement type for their organization.
Okay. So let's move to the next point here. What is the cost? I addressed this earlier on in the presentation, and so just as a review, if it's a single location, 2 escrow accounts or less, and 8 employees, the cost is going to be about $8,800. Now, the point I wanted to make here is when we're looking at these 3 companies, if you were to go out in the market and engage each of us separately, you're looking at approximately a 30% saving, sometimes more, depending upon the number of employees and the qualifiers that I just mentioned. So it's important to note that Certification Plus is not only affordable, but there is discounting involved as a result of these 3 companies coming together. Let's move to the next point here. My lenders have not requested a third-party certification yet, so why do I need certification? Pete, would you mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the, and I think this point was made by Rick and Chris early on, is that it's, as an agent, our folks are taking on a lot of risk as it relates to NPI and the protection of that NPI. And so while, yes, there are laws that identify title and settlement agents as financial institutions, and laws that say that financial institutions must comply with GLBA, and therefore title and settlement agents must comply with GLBA. While there are laws that are out there that say that the real risk to an agent is reputational risk or the financial consequence of having some type of data breach. And so what Certification Plus provides to the agent is the same type of standard that the banks are held to in terms of the protection of their information, that title agents are working toward that same standard, and it's scaled based on their resources and the type of agency that they have. But in terms of significantly mitigating the risk that's associated with the running of their business, Certification Plus really helps address that. And so, and I think that's a key point. When the lender's not driving the train in terms of getting a certification, people need to think about the risk associated with their business and the importance of doing this to help mitigate that risk.
But if my lender requests a higher level of certification after I've completed a Certification Plus engagement, and Pete, I'm going to call on you one more time on this one if you don't mind.
Yeah, and that's the benefit, I think, of working together with this team. So if you did a certification, if you had an agent who did a Certification Plus, and then at some point in the future, a lender came back and said, no, we'd rather have a SOC 2 as opposed to Certification Plus. Well, the first thing that we would do is talk to that lender and educate that lender about what Certification Plus is. And in some cases, within the last year, we have educated lenders in such a way that they have accepted that consulting engagement as opposed to making the agent step up to a higher level of assurance. And so so that would be the first step. But if the lender was adamant that no, that this particular agency represents enough risk for us that we want that higher level of assurance, well, because we're a public accounting firm, we can do that work and provide that test engagement. Still working with SCA and REDS in that process, but completing that document in a way that it addresses the professional standards of the AICPA. And so, an agent wouldn't have to go out and engage somebody else. It would be the same team. It would just be that what we prepared, the report format that we prepared at the end of it would look different than it does with the Certification Plus.
Thanks, Pete. And next point, how do agents initiate the process, and how do all three companies coordinate the engagement behind the scenes? Chris, would you mind taking this?
Sure. I just wanted to go back to the last question and just touch base there quickly. Our industry, the title industry generally, is selling risk assurance. We're selling these products to either lenders or owners as our safeguard on the risk that their claim to title could be questioned or ultimately, in the worst case, defeated. And that's exactly what we at Certification Plus are doing. We're selling a risk assurance product that agents, we would think would appreciate in terms of their own risk. And in terms of, and that's to avoid the breach or the theft of escrow funds. It's not just the information that we traffic in an enormous amount of, but it's the fact that there's tons of funds, hundreds of millions of dollars every day going through our industry, and the fraudsters know not to attack Wells Fargo or Citibank. Why not go for the small title agent in Tennessee or wherever? And as Matt said, SCA is one of their services, provides the social engineering testing where they can ping your employees with phony emails saying send the wiring instructions here. And that really keeps employees smart and sharp. And to give the peace of mind that Matt alluded to also, agents, by undergoing this process, know that they're a much safer environment. To Rick's point, they've protected themselves. They can market that to lenders. And if a lender comes back and asks for a higher level, going from the 70-yard line, well, let's say going from the 50-yard line to the goal line is a lot easier than starting back at your own goal post. So really important that you start the process now. If lenders haven't given you the guidance, or if the lenders an agent works with haven't given specific guidance, we know where this is going. The crystal ball is just looking at what the regulators like the OCC and the CFPB are telling the lenders. The only question is when the lenders are going to push that down, and that's largely a function of getting past TRID, which we all know is starting to happen now, and the lenders are focusing back on this. And what they're going to ask for is largely a function of the size of the agency relative to the market they're in. And so getting started quickly, having something in place as a base product, and then being able to scale up is really critical and something that we focus on all the time. The great thing about Certification Plus from an agent's perspective also is that they don't have to call 3 different companies for their Gramm-Leach-Bliley compliance, for their certification, and for their employee training. They can call any one of the 3 companies. The company that they contact will act as the lead company and single point of contact. Each company's onboarding staff will then take the information from the agent that they need to go back behind the scenes to the other 2 companies, create a proposal, and get that back to the agent. So at inception, one point of contact. As we move through the process, we try to keep it at one point of contact for scheduling and other purposes. Of course, once you're actually working with the other 2 companies, you get to meet and work with their staff and have access to them directly. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Hey, Glenn.
Yes, sir.
It's Rick. So we're going a little bit over here.
Okay.
And I always try to keep this as close to an hour as we can, but this is really some great information. But I do have some questions from the field that I want to try to throw in here.
Let's go there. Yeah.
If I could.
Sure.
So here's an interesting one. Is there anything you can offer an agent who has recently completed a best practice certification from PYA that did so prior to the joint effort with SCA and REDS? And what about an agent that has their best practice certification from another vendor but did not get the additional offerings? So I guess that can work, if somebody went through SCA and didn't get PYA, or REDS, Chris, with you, and didn't get the other things. How can you work the other offerings in, and could you do a better pricing if they didn't need all 3?
Chris, did you want to handle that?
Sure. So this is a new question for us, to be perfectly frank, but speaking for myself, and I'm going to project to my colleagues here, we would, if a company had gone through a PYA certification process and was looking to add on the other 2 components that SCA and Real Estate Data Shield brings, I'm relatively certain that we would bring our pricing to the bundled pricing point that Glenn alluded to, and bring that savings to the agent, because first of all, they're fidelity agents, and second of all, we want to see the industry as a whole pull themselves up by the bootstrap, and we want to help that PYA client. So Matt can weigh in, but I know that REDS would come in at the same bundled and discounted pricing. If the certification was done through a different accounting firm, they would still be eligible for the fidelity preferred pricing that both SCA and Real Estate Data Shield offer.
Yes, this is Matt, and they would be authorized for the preferred pricing with us as well. And one of the things one of the great things about teaming with PYA and SCA and Real Estate Data Shield is we have a general comfort level with our processes, and we're very comfortable with the processes that are in place and understand what is covered and what's gone through for each one of those. So if it was with one of us, it definitely makes that process a much smoother process for us when we're going forward with the client if they didn't have the Certification Plus. As far as another accounting firm, when looking at it from a Pillar 3 perspective, generally the biggest difference is the on-site assessment and getting into doing the vulnerability scans and vulnerability assessments and going a little bit deeper in the GLBA. So that'll be the difference for clients. But having already been through that, you're still going to get that preferred pricing, and you're going to have a lot of the legwork done. So it's going to make it a lot smoother process, and the remediation more than likely is going to be a lot smoother as well.
Okay, great. So you guys will send me, anyways, your general pricing, so I can make that available to everybody.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So another quick question, because I think this was important as well when you were talking about remediation of this. So you guys come in, you do your assessments, and just for an example, you go on an agent, you find out that they're not encrypting their email, right? So you find that as a gap or a hole in this process. So when that happens and the agent says, okay, great, I realize I'm going to have to encrypt my email, who do you suggest? how do you go about recommending service providers to fill those holes, those gaps? And will you, of course, defer as much as you can to our preferred vendors?
So yes, so if Fidelity does have a preferred vendor, then they will be one of the recommendations for sure, depending on the environment. If it makes sense, we look at each individual agent's environment separately. So not every agent's going to get the same recommendations for a solution or remediation process. So we look at their individual environments. Obviously, a lot of times that coincides with a preferred vendor with Fidelity, and one of the reasons why we may recommend it, even though there may be other solutions that are equally as good with the preferred vendor that Fidelity has, they've come up with preferred pricing for the agents, and that helps reduce their costs. So we take that into account as well.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And we want to make sure that we're comfortable as a company with the vendors that you're providing as best we can. And two, that of course they are getting preferred pricing as well, because we want to reduce the cost for our agents as best we can.
Yeah, we try and take all of that into account.
Okay, and that's great. And let's end on this. So since compliance, and Chris, I think you have said this in the past, is a journey and not a destination. As this stuff evolves and data security evolves, and certainly the hackers out there get more involved in going after our agents and that type of thing. So as an ongoing process, how do you guys, what's the touch points for you with an agent?
So we stay very up to date on emerging risks. We work closely with banks as well. We work closely with all our underwriters and their agents, and they all know. And please, all of you, if you hear about anything in the industry that's happened, please share it with us. We'll incorporate it into our respective processes to become that much more smarter and sharper at emerging threats. So like one example of that is with SCA's social engineering test. Real Estate Data Shield is working with SCA to come up with a real-time threat training. So, for example, emails to your staff saying, hey, sorry about this, but at the last minute we need to change our wiring instructions. And so we try to keep as up to date, and that's one of the benefits of the three companies working together, because you've got the collective wisdom, research, ongoing awareness from the three companies out there touching agents, underwriters, trade associations, and getting, quote, industry smart. And then we share that in our weekly calls, and that immediately gets incorporated back into our products and services. That's why we developed the 2 new modules for Real Estate Data Shield. That's why SCA is constantly updating their social engineering, testing, and phishing emails for employees.
Perfect. All right, and that was the perfect answer. I just wanted to make sure as this process goes on that the agents are continually evaluating certainly their processes and making sure that they're staying as compliant as they can be. All right, so with that, I know we're about 10 minutes over. Glenn, I want to thank you. Chris, Peter, Matt, this has been great. I learned a bunch of new stuff about what you guys are doing. And everybody on the phone, I will be sending out this slide deck to everybody along with the pricing. Of course, we recorded this as well, so if you guys want to revisit it, you can at any time. So guys, thank you so much, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.